there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jen. Today we're going to talk tie-dyeing techniques. And mainly we're going to talk hot water irrigation. That's the technique that I use. And here's Barlow. Say hi to Barlow. Hi Barlow! Get up here. Come on, get up here. Come on, get up here. Get up here. Barlow, get up here. Get up here. I'm talking to the camera. Well, he loves to help, so I'll let him help as long as he doesn't hinder too much. So we're talking hot water irrigation. Now, hot water irrigation is pretty much a method where you put dry dye on the fabric and you mist it with hot water until the dye soaks through. The hot water helps it adhere to the fabric. So as anything that I dye, generally I will start with washing what I have when I first get it from the store, or wherever my items come from. I will pre-wash everything, and I try to dry in the dryer at least once. I need to dry them to pre-shrink them. I feel like it's if a customer is going to spend quite a bit of money on an item, they want something that's going to fit, that's not going to shrink 2 or 3 sizes before when they wash it the first time. So I pre-wash everything. I soak everything in soda ash also. That is generally, I find that is the best way to get a bright colorful product is soda ash. Soda ash and time and temperature are what it takes to get a bright, bold and bright dyed item. Okay, I guess we'll try this again. The dog is still here. He's still here, but he's not in my face, not sitting on my lap at this point in time. So as I was saying, I mix a cup of washing soda with a gallon of water to pre-soak my items with. And I wring them out until they're a little damp and tie them up. I prefer to tie up damp items. The fabric seems to hold together better when it's damp as opposed to when it's dry. I really just can't tie anything when it's dry. I think that's the main thing, is I can't tie dry items very well. So once I tie my item, I usually let the item dry for a day or two, and then if the item is too wet, you have saturation problems because the water doesn't necessarily want to go through the item. If the item's dry, the water and dye will be drawn into it. So after my tied item has been hanging out for a couple days, I usually sprinkle a little dye on top of them, and then I get hot water, and I have a heavy-duty garden sprayer, a garden pump sprayer that you use for like spraying your garden and lawn with chemicals or whatever you want to use, I guess, if you want to do that. I use it for my hot water. So I heat my water about up to 180 degrees, and then I pour it into my pump sprayer and spray my dyed item at a bit of a mist, generally a couple feet above the item, and then as the dye starts soaking through, I spray closer and closer. You kind of don't want water to pool up on top of the item because you don't want the dye to go off of the sides of the item, and you don't want the dye to, where you have separate colors of dye, you don't want the colors to mix together too much, at least on that part. So I try to spray a couple feet above the item until I get a good saturation going and a lot of the dye is already down into the product. Then I'll move the sprayer down closer to the fabric. So I will do that. Generally, I dye one side of the item depending on what it is. There are some things where I'll dye dye it on one side, then flip it over, dye it and spray it on the other side, so I have dye coming out on both sides of it. I kind of estimate on those items if the dye has gone halfway through the product or not, and then flip it over and do another estimation of halfway through the product. It's a trial and error. It's something that you just learn over time. And you know, I'll be honest, there's things that I dye and I'm like, oh, it's saturated really well, and then when I untie it, sometimes I've tied it too tight and there's still stuff that has white in the middle. But you know, it's tie-dye, and it is how it is. So once the dye has soaked through the fabric and I have my item dyed as I would like, I generally throw my items, well, place my items in a plastic tote and let them hang out for a day. I like to batch my items overnight or 24 hours. That's generally what I like to do. I know that hot water irrigation is allegedly instant and you could rinse it out immediately, but I find that if I rinse it out immediately, I'm getting not a very bold and bright item. I feel that you still need a little bit of time. The time and temperature is the whole thing with dyeing. So I will leave them for a day. Sometimes, depending on what it is, if I can't get to it, it's going to be 2 days. I try not to go more than 2 days of having an item batch, especially if it's hot water irrigation. If it is, if it's a liquid dye, I will go at least 2 days, at least 48 hours, if not longer. But then I usually just throw everything I have in a 5-gallon bucket and fill it with water. I have a plunger that I swish it around with and mix up the items in the water really good and rinse them out. Just repeatedly do that until they start to run clear. And depending on if I have enough, I'll throw them in the washing machine and let the washing machine take some of the work away from me, because you know it's a lot of work rinsing out these things and letting them drain and doing that repeatedly. So it is a little easier to have the washing machine do it, and the washing machine will spin out some of the dye. And one of my final things, and I find one of the most important things that I do when I do a rinse out, is a hot water soak. I do probably about 3 hot water soaks on a batch. And again, I fill a stock pot with water and let it boil, and then just pour it on top of the items in the 5-gallon pail and swoosh them around, and then either let it cool off or dump them out when they're still hot. If the water, generally I find that even after doing a really good rinse, I really need a hot water rinse, and the water is still pretty dark colored when I do my first hot water rinse. And I'll do 2 or 3 hot water rinses, maybe 4, depending on how dark the water is. I like the water to be, it's never going to be completely clear, but I like it to be generally pretty clear, so that I know that the item is not going to bleed at all for the customer. So that is my process. It's the main process that I do, is the hot water irrigation. I've got some videos coming up showing some of that process. My channel is to show you how to, and even help myself learn how to make things quicker, make things easier, make high quality, good looking products that that you can get somewhat of a profit on. It's very hard in the craft market to make a profit. So that is it for now. I am Jen, and this is Barlow, and we are signing off, and thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.